been talking to two guests, Ambassador Joe Keshi, who talked about the departure in less than 50 days of the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Elizabeth Mary Truss, and all the issues surrounding that. And we've also talked about the President of Nigeria appointing a new interim administrator for the Niger Data Development Commission. Let me start with you, Professor Kila.
Yes. Where do we start from? We're from the UK, I guess. That's where you started from.
Yes, yes.
Well, I think we've seen, the parliamentary system play in a very raw way, in a very full way of what can happen when you have a government of peers, when two things are missing. There are two things that are not present in the parliamentary system, unlike the system we're used to in Nigeria. One is that the role of the executive is not fixed. It's not you're elected and you stay there for 4 years, except something extraordinary happens. That does not happen in a parliamentary system. The other thing that is missing there is that there's no deferential system in which somebody says the president is the father, or the president is our father, or the father of the nation, or the father of the party. No. In that system, the leader is one of us who, at this specific moment, is in charge, the system of primus inter pares. And in that kind of system, you gain your leadership every day. You justify it every day. You defend it every day. And if for any reason you cannot justify it or gain it, then you lose it. And that is what has happened. Ms. Truss went to power with a coalition that sort of brought her up. And she did not expand her coalition, and she did not keep grasp on that coalition, and she lost it. And that's a system where people are not just going to let you run down the system. At some point, they call you to order, and that is what has happened. And there are a lot of people calling for election, the opposition led by the Labour Party, and people generally who think it's time for people to have a say. I think they're wrong. I think they're wrong because the founding fathers of the British system that created this parliamentary system are very clear on the fact that it is not an executive presidential system, it's a parliamentary system, and it is the party that wins, even if it is the face of the leader that allows it to win. The consequence of that is that as long as that party can create, or indeed, as long as any group can create a majority in parliament, then you have a government of the day. The reason being that, and they've done this thing really to avoid the populism of people speaking above reason to emotions to get power. So I think, people should step back a bit and understand what's going on there. It might not be a popular position, but I think it's a deep position which I hold dearly. You were interested in the return of Boris Johnson.
Well, I mean, that's part of the news.
It's part of the news, yes, you're right. I think Boris Johnson can come back. I mean, I think he's going to run to try to come back. Boris Johnson, besides his character, which Ambassador Keshi says, but beyond that, there's something about Boris Johnson, besides his personal character. There's something about him that traces a lot the life of Winston Churchill. If you want to understand Boris Johnson, you have to try to go back to Winston Churchill. And, this bulldog that bounces back, that, is always there to say, you can't get rid of me. This is me, I'm colorful, I'm vibrant. I mean, Winston Churchill was a non-drunkard. We can use that word now. But as he always said, alcohol has taken less from me than it has given me. I've taken more from alcohol than it has taken from me. That was his way.
I won't use that to define Winston Churchill.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes beyond that.
Of the fact that he couldn't do well in English classes. Rose to win the
Nobel Prize.
The Nobel Prize.
Nobel
in
Prize.
English literature,
exactly.
And wrote very remarkable books, including My Darling Clementine.
My Darling Clementine, exactly.
I was Prime Minister twice.
Exactly.
The first Prime Minister when Queen Elizabeth II ascended the throne.
Go ahead. And then he came back. You see, that's the point. And to understand Boris Johnson, with all his flaws, one needs to understand his historical model. And his historical model is Winston Churchill. So he's not sort of allergic, faced by the idea of coming back. So I think he will come back, and it will all depend on he can have the vote. And it's important to notice that the Conservative Party are against Boris Johnson, not because of policy, but because of behavior. So the question is, can they forgive that behavior? And two, the pending issues that Ambassador Casey rightly noted, I do not think they're definitive. I think it can be used against him because indeed it's an albatross around his neck to know that you have some pending issues to deal with and you're already known for bad behavior. So to that extent, he has a few things going against him, but I think he also have quite a few things going for him.
Professor Akintenwa, before we go to Professor Awurawo.
When you are presented with 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 devils, and you have to make a choice, it is normal that you try to take the better devil. So in this case, if Boris Johnson has bad character, he does not have integrity, but it's on record that he has the capacity to defend what the British people believe is their core national interest. They wouldn't bother. So in this case, it is very consistent with the Yoruba proverbial saying that if you do not, because of oil, eat yam, you must, because of yam, take oil. So that is what is actually happening. On this point, Ambassador Jokeshi made us to share his viewpoint that the presidential system in Nigeria, the way we operate it, is such that it does not give any room for any return to parliamentary system. And in this case, I don't share that particular view for two main reasons. The first reason is that many people in Nigeria, probably not majority, but notable Nigerians, have been calling for restructuring to the extent now that the National Assembly came up with a bill asking for amendment to the Constitution, which requires two-thirds, ratifications by the state assemblies. 24, 25 of the state assemblies have refused, assent, have refused to ratify that, insisting that the quest for state police, be inserted into it. Omar Agege is trying to bastardize the debate, and they are now responding to say, look, Mr. Honorable Omar Agege should stop, giving them bad names. And I think that the position of the State House of Assembly is quite consistent with a true federal system. In this particular case, National Assembly is far away from the center of local activities. The House State of Assemblies, are closer to the people. They know quite better what the situational reality of the problems is all about. So in this case, the southern, Western people have been asking for instance, a return to parliamentary system, even regionalism, that provided ab initio for, true federalism, arguing that the foundation of Nigeria itself was largely predicated on the understanding that a true federal system will be put in place. So in this case, when people are asking for rewriting of a new constitution, rather than modifying, reviewing, or altering some provisions, it cannot be rightly argued, but it can be hypothesized that, well, return to parliamentary system is not likely. I think it is most likely. Ambassador Keshi is only trying to tow the path of President Muhammadu Buhari, who normally will argue that Nigeria is indissoluble, that Nigeria is indivisible. No, Nigeria can be divided at any point in time. You see, experiences have shown the world over. We've seen, even here in Africa, Eritrea was carved out of Ethiopia. Southern Sudan, which started their problems as far back as the 1950s, was carved out of Sudan. So examples abound, especially when there is controversy over the constitution. That's at that particular level. I agree with Ambassador Keshi that, look, we need more of decentralization. And if he's talking about decentralization, he's also indirectly complaining that the current system itself is not good. So it is intrinsic in that particular case.
Okay.
Now,
Professor
when we look at...
Maybe at this point, maybe we should bring in Professor David Aurawa. Professor David Aurawa, I'd like you to make your own comments. Maybe you want to start with the Niger Delta Development Commission and the fact that we've just had another transition there, which was what our second guest, Omoviru Williams, focused on.
Thank you very much. The Niger Delta Development Commission, of course, we know the history, why it was established in the year 2000, that we know. It was supposed to bring development to the Niger Delta, to complement the efforts of government at different levels, so that the Niger Deltans could have a more rapid level of development. But like Mr. Williams said, the NDDC has failed to fulfill its mandate as provided for in the law establishing it, which was what informed President Buhari's intervention to do a forensic audit, in late 2021. Well, the audit is over, and we haven't had anything since then. Personally, I think that the president made a mistake of not inaugurating that board, while the forensic audit went on. Many people just go to the president, tell him stories, and somehow he accepts them. And all of that affects, the quality of governance and, of course, by extension, the quality of life of Nigerians. Members of that board were not part of those who were there before that the forensic audit was supposed to, inquire into. And so a board being in place would not have been any impediment to the forensic audit being carried out. But somehow, Akpabio went to the president, told stories, and as they say, the rest is history. We have seen how the trajectory, Joe Nunye came, did his own, Daniel Ponde came, did his own, Nakwa also came, has also done his own. And if another forensic audit to be done to cover from late 2021 to the point we are, late 2020 rather, to the point we are now, or even from 2019 rather, we will likely have as much controversy as you have had, before that time. Because, during the COVID, we saw when Ponde said they spent billions to take care of things that they couldn't have taken care of during, the COVID period, and how Ponde collapsed when he was being interrogated by Parliament and all that. Moving forward, things should be better if the board is inaugurated and monitored, because we have a way of trying to personalize things and instead of focusing on the common good. So I would say that the board should be inaugurated promptly, and there should be close monitoring to ensure that the board carries out the objectives of NDDC as provided for by the law setting up, so that Niger Deltans can have a higher level of development, which was the objective of setting up the NDDC.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor David Aworawo. Let's move on. Let's take another subject, and maybe we'll take all of these issues together. The next subject is the APC. The ruling All Progressives Congress has finally launched its campaign council and manifesto 4 weeks after the official start of the campaign season. The party is calling its 80-page manifesto an action plan for a better Nigeria, which identifies problem areas such as security and the economy. In the forward, the APC presidential candidate Bola Tinubu suggests that Nigerians do not want he calls the broken, unimaginative, fake promises repackaged and fed to them again. President Muhammadu Buhari, who inaugurated the Presidential Campaign Council and unveiled the manifesto, said Nigeria is safer in the hands of the APC. President Buhari is the chairman of the Campaign Council, and party chairman Abdullahi Adamu is the deputy chairman of the council. Vice presidential candidate Kashim Shettima will serve also as vice chairman, and Plateau State Governor Simon Lalong is the director general of the Campaign Council. Here's a report.
Despite the unfavorable circumstances of global economic downturns, the coronavirus pandemic that practically grounded the world for over a year and upset many nations' growth, very low international oil prices resulting in low revenue, and our local challenges of insecurity and inherited systematic corruption, we have managed to make our country stable and lay a solid foundation for progressive growth.
We are sure that we can make realizable the cross-Saharan pipeline to bring our gas to Europe and compete with Russia, compete better, generate the necessary revenue. I stand before you proudly, noting that those who are afraid of the budget, they were talk of borrowing, and it's borrowing.
Our presidential candidate, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and his teammate, in conjunction with the party, has developed a detailed manifesto that clearly spells out his roadmap for taking Nigeria to greater heights and impacting the lives of the people. Therefore, while others spend their valuable time addressing personalities and other frivolities during the campaigns, we shall, with the mission and vision of our candidate and our great party, encapsulate in a manifesto towards delivering the dividends of democracy to Nigerians.
Okay, I don't know who here has had the opportunity to take a look at that manifesto. It's titled Renewed Hope 2023, 80 pages long. And what do you think? Professor Kila, it looks like you have read it. You have read it.
I have read it.
What do you think?
Well, first of all, let me assure Nigerians that it is 80 pages, but you shouldn't be afraid to read it. You know, it's because the fonts are big and lots of images. It's not a lengthy document. It's an easy read. So really, anybody who's educated and viewers of this program have no reason not to read it. So that said, I think one thing needs to be stated, that overall, really, and this is a very scientific analytic consideration here, that the manifesto really, it has more of qualitative import than quantitative import. Because in reality, it's less than 10% of voters that are affected by the manifesto. If you think about the number of people that actually read it, maybe for the first time, let's hope millions of people actually read the manifesto. Generally speaking, it is less than 10% of people who are moved by manifesto. The people that are moved by manifestos are those you call the rational, reasonable, independent, functional voters who really look at the program and say, this is why. About 70% to 75% of voters will vote for the candidate anyway, or will vote for the party anyway, regardless of what. They just go by emotions. Then you have another about 10 to 25% who vote against. They will vote against somebody if the other side can make a strong case. I think in this case, the manifesto is good, but there are two problems with the manifesto that the Asiwaju Bola Ahmed has, Tinubu has put forward for the APC. The first problem is that it talks as if it's going to create something new or correct the errors of the present administration, where then stands on a contradiction saying that it's going to continue on where it stopped. So there's that contradiction there to say, you appear to want to correct the error, but then you are continuing it. That's going to be something that will be used against the manifesto. The other thing, I think the other problem that the manifesto is going to have for the kind of readers it is meant for, people who reason, people who rationalize, and people who are functional about their thinking, is that they're going to wonder that because the candidate, the presidential candidate, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and his deputy, Shettima, are not new people, they're not passerbys, they're people who are in the system, part of the administration, they're going to be wondering, where were they when things were going wrong? You know, is it that they did not see it, or they agree with it, or they wanted it to fail so that they can come and shine? So those are the kind of problem, because there is no radical shift from what we have at the moment. As a matter of fact, the manifesto, for those of us who are addicts of reading manifestos, reminds a lot of Hope 93, and it reminds a lot of 2015 APC. There's nothing wrong in them. It is just that it is not a radical shift. You know, one was expecting some big things. I think the writers of that manifestos have done a good job of writing a letter, but they've not actually come up with radical ideas that, you know, that will set the world on fire. We've not seen something like saying we're going to create X amount of jobs in X period of time. You know, we've not seen big things. The big manifestos in the history of Nigeria are the ones of the UPN in 79, where you had cardinal points. Free education, free health. It was, you know, easy to catch on like that. Then you had 93, which was a good manifesto. Then you had 2015, which was a manifesto that talked about change. So in this case, we're talking of renewed hope, which is not change. You know, what happened to the hope we had before? We want to renew it because something is not going well. And to add to the sort of problem this campaign is likely to have with rational voters is that it was launched by a president that claims things are going well. And the candidates are running on the mantra of things are going well, they're going to be better. So I think overall we have continuity, and the opposition party, all parties, will have to show no, we want to discontinue. So in a way it exposes, I believe, the candidacy of Asiwaju Tinubu to this kind of criticism. But, you know, but overall, you know, it's a good paper, but it's, the problem is when you put in the context. If it was written for a candidate, say, Professor Akintanewa, who has not run for president before, it would be a new person coming to say, I want to change the system. But when you put in the context, you know that the person running is somebody who was a leader of the ruling party, part of it, you start to think, okay, where were you when we were going this way? Were you for it? Were you against it? If you were against it, what have you said? You know, when they were not doing enough, did you raise up your hand to say, guys, this is not the agreement we had in 2015, or were you just quiet?
Let Professor Akintanewa wade into the matter. Prof, I don't know whether you have read the manifesto, but what most people point out is about the details, the how. If you look at that document, it talks about the same things: economy, security, agriculture. We will create jobs. Anybody who wants to be president of Nigeria can come and say the same things and make promises. But it seems to me that in the various manifestos that we have seen, the missing point is about how. How are you going to do it?
And when?
Are you going to increase tax? Are you going to put some structures in place? Where are you going to put those structures? Nobody is telling us all of that. Everybody is just saying, oh, we know the road. We will follow the man that knows, is it the road or the way? You know, or they will tell you, oh, we have an idea of how it has been done. What we have done in so state, we will reproduce at the federal level. The times have changed, haven't they? 2023 is different from 1997, from 2007, from 1999. How exactly do you want to help Nigerians out of their mystery? Have you seen the documents, sir? And what do you think?
Reading a manifesto is quite different from studying a manifesto. I have been studying the manifesto, but I've not completed that. I started by looking at the provisions on foreign policy. And I've discovered that, grosso modo, the manifesto is well written because it has a methodological approach to it. Here, what is happening is simply that for every issue, every topic taken, it presents the problematic. It identifies a problem. Then in terms of how to deal with the problems, they have a number of suggestions. And as rightly pointed out by Professor Killer, the manner, the how, is what has not been well explicated. I do not share the view of Professor Killer that there is contradiction there. It looks like a contradiction, but it is not. What is actually happening is what I've always been talking about in this case, a change in continuity. The APC administration, government, Buharianism is there. They want to continue. But where, for instance, in terms of tactical approaches, where there are problems, Tinubu wants to make changes there. That is what I have found out from my close, examination of the issues. I didn't take a costly look. I tried to understand that. I've read the PDP's manifesto. I'm trying to compare and contrast. You see, here, my major problem with the manifesto, especially with the title, Renewed Hope. The problem is, which hope are you renewing? What type of hope are you talking about and that you want to sustain? If you are talking about hope, the origins of which has been traced to 1993, and you tangentially mentioned that. Abiola's hope, fine, but the hope was tainted. He was elected, but he was never given the opportunity to take advantage of his election. Now, if you are talking about renewed hope, then you need to qualify and explain the word renew. Because the impression I have now is that if you want to toe the line of Hope 93, then Tinubu will be elected and he will never be given the opportunity to occupy the seat. So you need to expatiate, a clear-cut explanation of why. In 2015, you talk about change. 2019, you talk about next level. Both change and next level. Where are we today? So,
inflation, 20.77%.
You cannot be more correct. You cannot be more correct. That's the issue. Rate. So now you want to renew hope. Further inflation. Further insecurity. You see, governance is simply because people do not actually understand the meaning of a manifesto. In advanced countries, it is manifesto that will be used to judge your re-election, to determine your re-election. You promised XYZ.
Where is it?
How much have you been able to
Okay, Prof,
achieve?
let's bring in Professor David Awurawa here. Professor Awurawa, have you read the APC manifesto, and what do you think? And what's your idea generally about all these manifestos that politicians offer us? Manifestos that sometimes they've not read, manifestos that they come back to us later and they say, no, they didn't say so. Strange, isn't it, that in Nigeria sometimes politicians don't even read their own documents?
Yes, I've read the manifesto.
Of foreign policy.
I've read the manifesto, and I've also tried to compare with PDP and the Labour Party, the three frontliners in the current election cycle for the president.
No, there's NMPP too. People talk about
Yes,
four. You are talking about three frontrunners. Some people say four.
NMPP is far behind. We focus on the three frontliners.
But there's also the PRP, the People's Redemption Party, where you have Kola Abiola, and there's also the SDP. So I don't think we should forget these other
And the ADC.
major stakeholders,
And the ADC.
Yes. But carry on. What you see may not be what I see. But carry on. But there are other parties.
About 15 or 16 of them or so, but at least two of the frontliners have released their manifestos. The PDP first, and then the APC. I've read both and tried to compare them. First, I tried to look at their ideological leaning, because the APC tries to say that, they are progressives. They are to the left of the center. The PDP, they are more about privatization, private participation in the economy and all that. So people tend to look at them as belonging to the right of the center, so to speak, even though that distinction is not really that clear as some of the leaders of the parties want to claim. But specifically with reference to the APC manifesto, it is very clearly written in simple language, and it is not difficult to comprehend the issues, what the government wants to do and how. The how question, yes, is not well, not clearly, elaborately stated. But there are a few hows there. For instance, in terms of the economy, how do you hope to, revamp the economy? It is stated that they will develop gas, they will develop more capacity in oil. They will diversify the economy. It's all stated in the document. The hows are not elaborately.
Professor Awurawa, everyone is saying that.
That's the problem.
Everyone is saying that. That's not the how.
Yeah,
It's too general. That is the problem, Prof.
The hows, that's where you have the shortcoming. The hows are not, clearly explained. And so we are not able to take them on, very seriously. But two other issues I want to quickly comment on. One of them has to do with how much people believe in what these politicians are presenting as manifesto. For instance, in 2015, the government stated that to revamp the economy, create jobs and all that. And it was specific to say that it will do that by expanding the economy and use monies from those who have looted,
Yes.
and monies that will be saved from further looting to revamp the economy. None of such has happened, in the past 7 years. So even with the best of manifestos, with all the hows and whys and all that, Nigerians are not, they are not taking the manifesto seriously, because they say the one they presented to us in 2015, what has come of it? That is one. The other issue has to do with, a democracy where you have a large number of uneducated, people are not educated. I mean, this democracy, how effective, how efficient. Professor Killer just mentioned the fact that only a tiny proportion of the electorate will be influenced by the contents of the manifesto. That is very worrying. We have raised this issue over and over again. The adequacy, the suitability of this democratic structure in a polity where a large percentage of the population is not educated. People are still going to vote in line with ethnicity, region, religion, and things like that, which are things not good for democracy. So beyond looking at manifestos and all that, these are issues we need to interrogate moving forward, so that we'll not just be having, a democracy that will not, deliver what democracy is supposed to deliver, which is genuine and development that is sustainable for the polity.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Awurawa. We'll take, a short break, or,
take a short
or you want to say
Well, I'll just say this, that given that politicians will try to get away with general, vague promises, all we can do is to hope that the brotherhood to which Ruben Abati belongs to, of the media, will help we, the people, force them to tell us the how. That is what is left now, because
it's not journalists running for office.
No, it is
it's
journalists
the people running for office who should tell us how they will do it.
But the journalists should be asking them how. Every time you have them in front of you,
yeah, we keep asking.
Do more. Keep asking them more.
Okay.
Can I be more correct?
No, you cannot be more correct.
I cannot be more correct.
No, you see, the fundamental challenge that we are confronted with is that you have a manifesto telling us, guiding us, all right, about what we should expect. So, why not disagreeing with Professor Awurawa that people are most likely to vote on the basis of religious sentiments, ethnic sentiments, and so on and so forth? The fundamental truth is that the manifesto will remain a documentary record, all right, for future purposes. Now, the manifesto didn't tell us where Nigeria will be at the end of the tenure of whoever is elected. If you look at it, there's no projection as to where Nigeria will be and how we are going to get to where they want Nigeria to be. If you look at the provisions on, the section on foreign policy, there is a clear indication that the writers have a very good knowledge of international problems, international questions. But when you look at the suggestions there, they now say Nigeria will join the BRICS.
And so, Prof,
yes.
Can I say, on foreign policy, there's something actually interesting. The policy, the chapter on foreign policy is a general chapter, but the candidate himself has been coming out as more radical on foreign policy. He has challenged climate change. He's talking about competing with Russia. I think that document does not reflect Tinubu on foreign policy. That document is an academic general document.
You see, Professor,
which will have been written by your students.
The beauty of your
point
point
is
is
more
that
like you. Did you write it?
No, I didn't write anything. You see, the issue is that declaratory statements are quite different from documentary, what you want us to refer to.
Yes.
So you can declare anything, you can state anything.
Depending on where you are.
Precisely. Now, you want Nigeria to join BRICS, or Nigeria will take part in Mint.
Yeah.
Now, as a policy matter, why is Nigeria thinking of consumption, consuming foreign ideas, etc.? And Nigeria cannot provide leadership. Why are they not talking about la grandeur of Nigeria? So when you have a president coming to give us a manifesto like this, even if the manifesto is just for 10% or 5% of Nigeria something, foreign policy is very elitist. First of all, it is not for everybody. Yeah. But the people for whom you are writing,
the whole manifesto will
precisely
actually look at that.
So this is the issue.
Yes,
so deficiencies are there. If, for instance, a president is already deficient in general outlook of the problem, we are talking about a new world order, for instance. Yes. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi raised this issue in his lecture at the NI Thursday, and that he will want Nigerians, the Nigerian elite, he wants the Ruben Abati, the Kilawaras of this world, to be actively engaged in the making, in the discussion. Now, the discussion being given to us by Tinubu now is completely different. This is where the problem is.
Right, yes.
Okay, Prof, let's move on. Let's go to China. where the Chinese Communist Party just concluded their meeting, and where President Xi Jinping has increased his dominance when he was named and selected for another term as head of the ruling Communist Party on Sunday. This is a break with tradition and promoted allies who support his vision of tighter control over society and the struggling economy. President Xi Jinping thanked the party for the trust placed in him and promised to work tirelessly for the people of China. Xi Jinping, who took over in 2012, was awarded a third 5-year term as General Secretary, discarding a party custom under which his predecessor left after 10 years. The 60-year-old leader is expected by some to try to stay in power for life. Xi Jinping, here in China.
The first plenary session of the 20th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, CPC, has elected the new leadership. I was re-elected as the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee. On behalf of the new Central Leadership, I thank the whole party sincerely for the trust you have placed in us. We shall keep in mind the party's nature, purpose, and our own mission and responsibility. We will work diligently when performing our duty to prove the worthy of the great trust of the party and our people.
Okay, the Prime Minister, Li Keqiang, and also Wang, they are no longer members of the Politburo. Okay, but Xi Jinping has managed to survive. Hu Jintao, former president, was escorted out of the meeting. But whatever it is, Xi Jinping is in place. When this, meeting started about a week ago, he said his priorities will include the unification of China. Yeah. He mentioned Taiwan specifically. And he talked about, zero COVID policy, that is not going to change, on the basis of which, the West has criticized him quite heavily. And then there was some talk about, progressive movement in the area of the economy, but I don't think that has happened. What we have seen is still a state-dominated, economic framework coming from China. And I was asking Mr. Wilson, a Rice News economic expert, that, look, it will seem to me that Xi Jinping is taking this third term, is raising priorities to fight the West further, and that we may not really see the end, between the, in terms of the relationship between China and the West. But what do you think? All three of you are the experts. Let me start with you, Professor Akintenwa.
First of all, another term for Xi Jinping is expected because he ensured before now a constitutional change, amendment that will enable, unlimited renewal. So when people are forward-looking, this is what you should expect. We in Africa must stop reacting to international events. We must always strategically be looking forward, like all others, they look forward. First point. Second point, unification of China will remain until, for instance, the unification becomes a fait accompli. Because the Chinese are well determined that under no circumstance, whether it is Taiwan, whether it is Hong Kong, all along. By the time the British left, the agreement that was done was for 99 years. Now for Hong Kong, 2049, they expect that, look, 99 years will become history and they will take over. The Chinese are insistent on one China, two systems, and that under no circumstance will they concede. So, while the West, led by the Americans, will want to have Taiwan taken out, carved out, remain autonomous of China, means order and counter-order cannot but always amount to disorder. So the future is that disorderliness must be expected. When we are done with Russia and Ukraine, certainly we must come to China, Taiwan versus the West. So the problem is not for today. The problem is for tomorrow. When the Americans decided that the speaker will visit and the American military will now have to escort.
That was Nancy Pelosi,
Nancy Pelosi
going to Hong Kong, right?
Your head cannot be more correct. So you see, Americans are creating, they are provoking anger, and the Chinese are ready for that. The Chinese, the strategic long-term objective is that, look, they are already ready to take over leadership of global affairs. They don't say it directly, but they are preparing that, look, it's just like Professor Jean-Baptiste Durosel theorized that tout empire périra, that is, every empire shall perish. Now, the Chinese thinking is that, look, America, you have done your own, your time is over.
Okay.
And
it's called the coming conflict with China. And by the way, Nancy Pelosi was going to Taiwan. She went to Taiwan. And, you know, all of that.
China, yeah.
Professor Awurawa is back with us. Professor Awurawa, yes. Xi Jinping in China and Sino-West relations. It's what you teach every day. Although you have been out of commission for how many months? It's okay. Over to you. You are back now, right? The university is...
Yeah, I haven't been out of research. In fact, I'm even more grounded now than I was 8 months ago.
Okay.
I've been engrossed with developing myself, at all levels.
Okay.
And so I'm even better now than I was 8 months ago.
Okay.
Like I've said several times, teaching is just a small part of our job. When somebody is promoted, teaching carries less than about 10%.
Yeah.
The other things, research and all that carries the bulk of it, which is the bulk of our work. Anyway, that's by the way. Sino-American relations, Sino-West relations. From what we have seen, from what the West is doing, what the West has done, and from what we have seen from what China, from the meeting that just ended in China, it is very clear that relations will remain frosty in the months and years to come because China has stuck to its position and the policy has not changed a bit. In fact, rather, it has even maintained a stronger position on issues relating to its position in relation to the West than previously. So if one is to project, the conclusion that one can draw regarding Sino-West, Sino-American relations is that they will not likely improve anytime soon. But a couple of other things that came out of that meeting. It revealed that China is more focused on efficiency. They are not bothered about whether the man stays there for 10 years, 20 years, or whatever. They are more bothered. They are more concerned with what will work for them, what will be efficient, But to my mind, there will be a time that Xi Jinping will lose steam. What the lessons of history teach is that the stability of all regimes is corrupted by the corrosive power of time. I mean, I'm quoting Aristotle, and that has been proven over and over again. Xi Jinping is having his time now, but this idea that he might be there perpetually, a time will come where he will lose steam and he will have to go. The third level has to do with politics in Asia, politics in the South China Sea, relationship between China and Taiwan on the one hand, China and Hong Kong on the other. I agree with Professor Akintarinwa that the theater of global instability after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia is resolved will be the issues relating to China's stranglehold on, or attempt to maintain stranglehold on Taiwan and Hong Kong, and of course the West is saying we won't allow that to happen. China is saying that is what must happen. But my own position is that I don't agree that China should be, attempting to lord itself and impose itself on Hong Kong and Taiwan. We live in an era of self-determination. Let people determine how they want to be governed and where they want to belong. Throughout history, when a bigger power tries to impose itself on smaller entities, it's only for a matter of time. After some time, a time will come where they would assert their independence one way or the other. So my advice, for managers of the global system is that, and the Chinese need to, pipe down. The West need not to be as assertive as they are. I didn't agree that Pelosi should go to Taiwan. It's like looking for trouble where there should be none. I also don't agree that China should try to lord itself or impose itself on Taiwan and Hong Kong. What countries do these days to get allies is to win hearts and minds and not try to impose themselves by force. Because we live, what has worked and what has contributed to global stability is governance through self-determination.
Okay, Professor Killer, your take.
To students of politics, and most of the people who are interested in international politics are good students of politics. I think 3 lessons is this. Number 1 is that the leadership we have today in China prepared today about 7 years ago. They amended the constitution, they created a nucleus and a working system. The other lesson that we must take away from it is perhaps the fact that they're able to do it because they're bringing results to the table. The theory of efficiency, as Professor Awero defined it. The fact that under this leadership, China is expanding. Under this leadership, Chinese people seem to be more prosperous. Under this leadership, China become a global power. It will be interesting to see when results come out towards the end of this year. It is possible that for the first time in history, China overtakes the US in terms of economic power. We're looking at that projection. And that therefore allows the leader to perpetuate himself, at least to gain. But Professor Arua is a cynic, and he's right. He cites Aristotle in a very political, cynical way, reminding us that every political career ends in tears. No matter how good it seems, it is difficult to find political careers that do not end in tears anyway. One thing or the other. So this thing cannot be
political careers in Nigeria
that has not ended up. Well, maybe tears for the people, but in most cases, elsewhere it tends to be like we see Margaret Thatcher cry. Fake cry.
Well,
it tends to be exactly. It always ends up that way.
Turning, but
I also want
yes,
I also want students of politics to remember the quote that Professor Akinterora brought to us today. Empires always fail. Always empires fall.
You see, Ruben,
and that dream, yes.
Very briefly.
Yes.
There's a conflict between the position of the United Nations and the principle of self-determination.
Yes.
United Nations...
Section 1 of the UN Charter,
yes,
right?
That recognizes, yes.
It's in the UN Charter.
Yes.
Article 1.
The United Nations doesn't want member states
to disintegrate. But in principle...
No, but the principle of self-determination either
is enshrined
in the context of colonization,
yes.
decolonization,
yes.
and now as it is post-colonization.
Yeah.
They are in conflict because it's now a right. It's a fundamental right, it's a human right. You determine your own future.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now in Nigeria, as we have many people saying they want to disintegrate, they want to have Biafra Republic, Oduduwa Republic.
Right.
We now
First thing, professors of international law teach.
Yes.
They tell you, this is the UN Charter.
Grand
memorizer. And the first and when you go to the classroom for exam, there will be a question on it, on the UN Charter. Thank you very much, Professor Akinterua. Thank you very much, Professor Killer. And thank you, Professor David Aurawa. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati from my entire team here in Lagos. It's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.